So let me talk about this during our break. Let me just talk about what I just did during the last hour in our Pomodoro session. I went ahead and I kind of very roughly documented KEGML. KEGML is the markdown for the knowledge exchange graph, for a knowledge exchange graph. The wording on KEG has changed a little bit in the last week. I'm now calling a KEG is like the atomic unit, not the atomic unit, the composite unit of nodes that is sort of transportable. And it's kind of like a tarball, but not, right? But for knowledge. And so KEGML is the markup language, and I'm avoiding the term markdown as much as possible, even though it is Pandoc Markdown, for lots of reasons, including not to be limited to trademarks. So you can't really use the word markdown. The reason it's called common mark and gold mark and all those other ones is because calling something markdown with a capital M is actually a questionable reserved trademark from John Gruber and Aaron Schwartz, may he rest in peace. So calling stuff markdown with a capital M is actually like iffy water in terms of legality, and I don't want to have to go change the names on everything. So I've created KEGML, which is just KEG Markup Language, which Markdown is a markup language. By the way, what is a markup language? A markup language is just you have text and you put a whole bunch of little taggy things and stuff like that, and you're able to change that text and transform it into something else through a converter. That's all Markdown is. And so KEGML is a simplified version of Pandoc Markdown. Pandoc Markdown actually brings a lot of things to the table. They're the first to actually integrate MathJax and LaTeX. Kill me on the pronunciation. That's how I say it. And so that you can do actual book publishing, like academic publications and things like that have LaTeX notation and math and all that. And now GitHub Flavor Markdown, as of like 3 weeks ago, GitHub Flavor Markdown now actually supports MathJax, which is amazing. It's not trademarked, but it's questionable. And I've read so much about the whole common mark, how it came to be, and JGM, who created Pandoc, who's been running the charge and brought all the people to the table, including Stack Exchange and Reddit and GitHub. They got them all to the table and tried to agree on a common markdown, which ended up being several RFCs that are really not nailed down. But common mark is the closest thing to a standard. And actually, the latest push on common mark is to add something called classes, which we're going to talk about in a bit, and which I think are really cool. I really hope they get in. But things like tables, the first group to do tables was GitHub, I think, and then Pandoc's got like 5 different ways to do tables. The problem with Markdown in general is that it's got too many options. So yes, it is a simplification, but the problem is that so many people can express their creativity. There's an infinite number of ways, for example, to express a horizontal rule. So only and we'll call it a separator. It's not even, doesn't have to be a horizontal rule. Horizontal rule is always a bad name because that's a stylistic and rather than a semantic reference. It says, it must be a horizontal rule, and it doesn't have to be. It can be just however you decide to do that in your representation of the stuff. So one of the mistakes that I believe that Gruber and Schwartz made when they invented Markdown was they allowed too much flexibility, and they wanted to allow artistic expression in the Markdown because they were like anti, XML codification. They didn't know about XML back then, but they didn't want that, and that's fine. But really the better thing is kind of a happy medium between those two. And by medium, that's not completely not a pun. It's in reference to the Medium service, which we talked about in another questions. Medium came along and said, look, hey, all of our writers on Medium, this is what you get. You get paragraphs, you get italics, you get bold, you get you get hot links, which I haven't talked about that yet, and you get you get single indentation level lists, one level lists of numbered and they're bulleted. They're not like these complicated outliney kind of things. If you want a complicated outline like that, you probably don't want a document. You probably want a structured data language like YAML or something like that. And so that's the better way to express outlines and things like that. And those things, of course, are included in KEG in the design as core node types, major node types. So we'll go back to Excalidraw, and I will show you what I mean. So where is my Excalidraw? Yeah. Okay. So we have a text node, a data node, and a figure node. And so those really complicated outlines like you see in like legal documents and stuff. No, those documents are going to be around forever, or is really complicated RFCs, right? That have to have section numbers and everything on them. I mean, those things are fine, but they're not first-class citizens on the knowledge exchange, on the KEGNet, we'll call it, or the KEG pub, whatever you want to call it, the pub KEG, the KEG pub, the KEGNet, the KEG graph, the KEG grid. The KEG network is probably the best. The KEGNet, we'll call it the KEGNet. But you have text nodes and data nodes. So what did I do? During the last POMO? I went ahead and started codifying this. I've documented this a lot. If you wanted to see one of the derivatives of this, I actually did something called basic. I've been teaching something called basic markdown since the dawn of time. This is the basis for all of our documentation at work, for example. And what it is it's an opinionated version of markdown that says, look, when there's two possible ways to do it, we'll pick one best way. For example, italics can be underscores or stars or whatever. And it's crazy. It's crazy to try to figure out which one it is. It is somewhat tempting to put underscores and stuff, but the reason to not put underscores in anything is because underscores are often used in identifiers in words, and they actually are such a problem that GitHub does something different than every other markdown with regard to inter-word underscores. So we just throw them out when it comes to formatting, and and then we have something called backticks from model space. So these have new names now in KEGML. And there's a question about underscore escaping. There's a question about escaping. I really, really hate escaping dollars, but that's a pretty well-established standard, so we're going to keep it. You can scroll through that and look at images and all that stuff. Let me just put the link here. If you want to say that is a very, very basic form of markdown. It's 100% compatible with every form of markdown, including comma mark. But KEGML is even more actually it has many of those things, but KEGML actually has some things from Pandoc. That's why I put it's a version of Pandoc Markdown that are very enabling when it comes to publishing. So, for example, every printable character must be a Unicode code point letter class. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up. Unicode has done amazing things in defining readable stuff. It needs to be a visible. It needs to be a visible code point. That includes emojis. So emojis are first-class citizens. Simplified whitespace is the only whitespace that's allowed. That means tabs are not allowed at all in KEGML. You just get spaces or new lines, and a new line consists of a line return with a preceding optional carriage return, which is pretty much everything. But this is important because Unicode actually defines several other whitespace members that are almost never used, form feed and a bunch of stuff. And we just don't want that. We don't want that crap on our KEGNet. We want our KEGNet to be really wicked easy to parse and super highly consistent at the expense of some flexibility that even Pandoc can put. Because this stuff is going to be exchanged with other people. This isn't like in your closet, you're like writing your next title book in LaTeX or something, and you're extending it, Pandoc by writing a bunch of Haskell extensions. This is not That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing, or Lua, actually, you can extend Pandoc with Lua too. We're talking about creating a standard for knowledge exchange syntax that is very universal. And some of the problems here that still kind of trouble me is things like, order, like left to right, right to left kind of thing. And I think we've got it covered. We need to have some international people chime in on this once we get the spec finished. I need to get particularly some Asian country representatives to chime in and say, hey, is this going to cover you? Are you going to be able to write Asian documents in any of the Asian languages that are going to work, or frankly, Jewish, which is up and down and that kind of thing. Not Jewish. It's, what is it? That's not the, Hebrew. Duh. All right. So anyway, here we go. So a new line is always blocks delimited Hebrew. Yeah. Blocks delimited. We really want to make sure that KEGML can represent any language on planet Earth or Klingon. Because it's just super important that we're able to do that, right? Now, I do feel like we're going to get some trouble here because, for example, I mean, Klingon is a language that people might want to write in, and they would not be able to because the Klingon characters are not considered letters. They're definitely printables, though, I think. Um, I think it'd be really interesting because unless it's in Unicode, it can't be used. I mean, we might end up stifling some of the uses of the extended Unicode code planes. So we might have to come back to that. But I want to start out being restrictive and then slowly open the doors for other stuff to be added in as a need for it is created, because that'll make parsing and communication and exchange all the more efficient and less error prone. White space is consistent with the title already. Blocks. So all blocks are delimited with a blank line, and this is something that's a big annoyance for me in most Markdown. Well, the first time you open up a Markdown, let's go show you the Kubernetes one, right? So if you open up the Kubernetes Markdown, and one of the biggest annoyances of this thing is how horrible the Markdown is. I need to show you an example of horrible Markdown so that you can understand what. So another thing, no mixing your HTML into your Markdown. It is one of the worst things you could ever do. Weird characters. I'll just ignore it. Think Unicode is some bunch of nonsense. Yeah, no, those are all characters that are very valid that need to be addressed, right? But UTF is so hard. No, it's not. Those things need to be addressed. And I mean, if we're going to make a syntax for knowledge that's going to take the whole world into account, we need to be very careful with that. That's why I'm going to sit on this specification for a long time before we get it out there. And I'm going to very highly specify it using PEGN, which is a meta language I made for specifying languages. So anyway, take a free course on scalable microservice. This actually has gotten better. It used to be bad. But you see how they have spaces between their titles? They did not used to have that before. They did not have that before. So this here is, in my world, is called, I'm going to change it. I used to call it a fenced block, but I'm calling this a syntaxed block now. Because almost always when you have three backticks like that, you are creating a syntax. And this doesn't have a syntax right now, but sometimes you put go here and that would be the syntax. So it's a syntax block. I'm taking liberties with some of these names on purpose. So we do have some of the standard blocks on Markdown. So we have paragraph, which is, a paragraph. We have bulleted, which, have star and only star. Markdown supports like any number of possibilities, especially Pandoc for bulleted lists, and I don't want anything to do with that. Neither does medium. So numbered lists, and they're numbered. They're not ordered. Ordered means it could have been A or whatever. No, it's numbers. That means when you use one, you're going to get a number there. Now, depending on how it's rendered, it might be a number in a different language, but you're always going to get a number there. And the symbol for that is always one dot. One dot followed by a space. And the space is not optional. It's exactly one space. So that's all going to be specified in PEG, and I just want to kind of give you an overview. A figure is a block that has one image reference in it, and that's it. And that's KEGML, but in the larger schema of KEG, figures are not allowed at all, except for figure KEGML is not even allowed in anything but a figure node, and that is a constraint that is going to be very controversial. I'm going to hear about it, but I don't care. I don't think images should be included in Markdown. Bottom line, I think that you should call it out as a separate node type and then be able to reference that, just like you would in any other traditional publication. You can still embed it when you compose together some sort of artifact or document or whatever, but it's a separate thing, and it needs to be considered separately in our break on our organization of the knowledge content. So a heading is just a heading. By the way, they're not headers. A lot of people call H1, H2 headers. They're not. Header is a separate HTML tag. Semantically totally different. A heading is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 level headings. They all have hashtags. Those are called ATX style. So we should put here only ATX style headings only. So those are the ones that begin with slash or hashtag. Technically it's called an octothorpe, and that's it. Did I get that right? Yeah, so we only have that. We have semantic, and we only get 6, by the way, right? And that's somebody's decided that for us in the HTML world. That's up to them. Probably a good idea, but whatever. So I have a block called a semantic block. A semantic block is there. So Pandoc calls semantic blocks fenced, and it uses 3 colons. And I actually have one of these somewhere. Where did I put one? I think we have one in. I think we put it in my new book. I started using them. So this is a Pandoc only thing. This is not supported by GitHub Flavor Markdown, but it is supported by the variations for, read the docs and all those other things. It's a very common extension. It hasn't become a standard, but it's so important that we have a generic. Some people call it the div tag, but it's very important that we have a generic way to create a block that we can provide our own semantics for in this, and then you can define what the semantics are for that, and that is so important because these documents, when they're parsed, will be represented as ASTs, abstract syntax trees, that can be rendered in JSON or YAML or something. And people can take those abstract syntax trees and they can render entirely new documents. And when we come to a semantic block, they can decide they want different rules to render a semantic block. And without this, you are limited to just the semantic. To be truthful, these appellative, bulleted, numbered, figured, and all that, those really are semantic blocks already. So you kind of have to have this extension to this. If you don't have this, you're kind of screwed. And there's many ways that people have extended, but the most commonly accepted way to do this is the triple colons. You see this in the Jekyll documentation. You see this in Vue documentation. You see it in all kinds of different places. So that's what's up with that. Let me see if I can find the book so I can show you what I'm talking about. So I have the table of contents here. I think it was content. Yeah, organization and style. So this is optimal blog length, first person friendly, flag directory structure, kind of beware strong opinions. So this is me editing. This is actually a KEG node. And then we have, I'm going to look at this because we have commented in there or quoted, which I don't have in my thing yet. I'm trying to find another one that might have, I just want to show you. I'm trying to find, I guess I don't have one here easily handy. I thought it was there. Oh, content organization and style. Yeah, this has, no, I guess not. Oh God, I love that everything is flat like this. It's so much easier to navigate the whole tree from the command line. Oh, it's just so great. That was like a restriction that I'm super glad that I added. I can't find it. So, I mean, I don't know, another thing too is it's like totally, it should be greppable. Did I not put anything in here? Oh, it's in the spec. It's in the KEG spec. Yes, it is. Yeah, watch. Nope. Maybe not. What the hell? I'm like writing a markdown here. Where is it? I know it's there somewhere. Basically, it's just 3 colons. I mean, you know what? Here. If I go to the basic markdown, this is already a KEG node. I mean, this is already KEG, right? So I can go readme.md and you can see this. So this is an old school version of it. I'm not going to have headers anymore, but here we go. So there is a semantic block, right? That's my word for it. And okay, so back to what I was doing. Wait, what? What was I doing? All right, so semantic blocks, syntax blocks. Those are the ones where I used to call these fenced. These are the ones with 3 backticks, and they get 1 optional word after that indicates the syntax. So Go, JavaScript, you see these all the time. That's what makes it render as YAML when you like display something. In GitHub, that's been supported everywhere. It's one of the best reasons to use Markdown, by the way. It's also the reason you use Discord over Slack. Discord supports syntax backticks, triple backslash posted syntax. It does not support that in Slack, which is really unfortunate. Slack decided to thumb their nose at all the established standards for markup, and I really think that's sad. It's a huge mistake, probably one of the biggest mistakes. Verbatim is stuff that is indented 4 spaces or more, and it doesn't necessarily have a specific syntax. It's also not necessarily semantic. It can be. You can make a semantic verbatim block if you want to. But for the most part, in fact, semantic, that's actually an interesting thing. Semantic blocks can actually contain other blocks. And I think that's important for me to say that here. So semantic only semantic allows inclusion of other blocks. So it is really just a div. I don't want to put div here, but in HTML it would be rendered as a div for sure. I really hate divs though, because the HTML supports the use of a semantic tag where you could, instead of using a div, you could actually put the name of it. But because of complications in dealing with a DOM and everything with that, they don't do that way. They just make a div, and then they give the div classes and all that, which is fine. I am not going to put div here though. I mean, I could just call it a div. That's really what it is. I don't want that though. I'm going to call semantic. Because if it just put a div, then I'm going to just assign it as a visual division of the document. We need to make some sort of semantic grouping of something. And by the way, semantic is better than quote, right? So quoted. A quote is, as you know, is a semantic block. Yeah. A quote is a semantic block. Only semantic and quote allow inclusion of other blocks. The thing I don't like about quotes is, even though they're supported, they're a pain in the ass to write, because you have to indent. You have to put a, you have to put a less than sign in front of everything. Now, we are going to support them, but I really, really don't want to. I want to throw them out and just make it semantic, because semantic and quote are the same thing. Because of semantic and quote, we actually have to parse all the blocks in a document before we can come back and render it, because we don't have the whole thing. Otherwise, you could begin to, actually, that's not completely true, but it's still the right thing to do. Anyway, verbatim, as we said, verbatim is just indented. It doesn't have a specific syntax. It's just meant to be printed out as is, in mono font. Verbatim does not necessarily have to be code. So like an address or a poem or something like that is more likely to be that. Hard line breaks are multiple spaces. That's the same. That's pretty much generic everywhere. That's like, here's one right there. See that would be a hard break. If I actually put that in a paragraph, you'll see it. If I do this, and it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that there is a hard break there inside of my paragraph, and that is kind of essential for this kind of thing. So we'll say hard line breaks, multiple spaces. We have verbatim. We have tech. And so tech is LaTeX, and that is everything between $2 double dollars, and it does not necessarily have to be math. It can be any tech. It can be raw tech. It can be whatever your renderer is going to do, but it'll be largely ignored by everything else. And it'll just be displayed as a verbatim or a syntax block for most people, but that's fine. And then quotes. So quotes are, as I said, they're just semantic blocks that are basically quotations. I do not like them, but I feel like we need to support them because they are so prevalent. A quote is literally the same thing as a semantic with the quote class. That's what we're gonna make it into. In fact, I'm gonna say that. So the quote is exactly equivalent to this semantic with you know, with the quote class. So that way people can do this. Now, so Pandoc introduces this idea of classes, and they're trying to get it in Common Mark, and I really, really hope they get it in there. There's a couple things about this. So titles can have, I don't know if we're going to do this, but I think we should probably support it at some point. We should add it. I don't have it right now. Titles have the ability for you to add classes and identifiers to them. So, and it usually is like this. So if I had it like this, it would be main title or something, right? And this is a supported extension in Pandoc. Now, they're trying to get this. There are a lot of reasons that this is really nice. For example, this allows you to overtake the default conversion for a title. So we are going to specify let's see, fully specified title conversion and a title to slug conversion ID, because this is super important, and we're going to follow the Pandoc on this, which is different than GitHub. And that's actually one of the most annoying things, because you can use references, like localized references with a hashtag, and they will go to the wrong thing. They'll go to the right thing in Pandoc, and they'll go to the wrong thing in GitHub, because they use completely different algorithms for establishing what the slug for this would be. And one of the things that fixes that is this idea of a class or identifier. So you would put over here, you would just put this here, right? Now I'm tempted to allow these, they call them attributes, right? And right now titles allow like a class attribute. So you could say, title, and then you could have main title, and then you could have like class equals title, and you could have any number of other attributes. So, and this idea of adding attributes to Markdown is kind of on the border between complicating Markdown and turning it into HTML and allowing for consistency. So for example, this thing in Markdown would be this, but the crazy thing is that if it had any kind of accents in it or anything, those accents would be lost. If you have a dash in here, so if you have like a dash like this, then you get crazy shit like this as the identifier, because the dash is considered a word, and so it's not consistent. But we're going to need to lock that down, because people are going to want to refer to specific sections of the document. The reason, frankly, I'm so tempted, I'm so tempted to say that text nodes have to be single title headers and force people do it like normalized spaces. Yeah, no, there's the problem. Okay, so there's many ways we can do it. There's just no established standard for that. There's like 3, and I would just like to avoid the whole thing. So in my Zettelkasten text nodes, I have an extra constraint on top of all the other stuff, and that constraint is nothing but titles. Nothing but titles. And you might balk at that, but let me justify this. I am seriously close to doing that for the whole thing. And let me say why. Because if this is going to be very controversial if I do this. It's going to be hugely, hugely controversial. But if I force every single text node to have a single title only, then people are like, well, well, I want to have a composite document that's got a lot of stuff in it. It's like, okay, then refer to a bulleted import list. And then each of the main points will be its own text node. And then it'll be transport. You can move stuff around and stuff. Well, yeah, but then it won't jive. It won't make sense with the other thing. But that's the part about Scrivener that I really love, right? So Scrivener, you're kind of, motivated and pushed towards creating these titled sections that have basically one thought or one main theme, and sometimes they're composite. Sometimes they encapsulate other things, but those other things are also considered atomic. And so you can kind of think of it in a coding world like functions. They're kind of equivalent to functions. So a text node in that sense is a function. It gets one name, it has one thing, and maybe it uses other stuff in there, but it doesn't get crazy. And so I'm really on the fence right now but this has worked beautifully for me for my Zettelkasten. But Zettelkasten, by definition, each slip in a Zettelkasten doesn't stand for card. Zettel stands for slip. They only get one heading structure for SEO stuff, exactly, right? But see, here's the thing. We can get rid of all of that attribute tagging and translation stuff. We can get rid of it all in one way. Let me show you how I've already done it. So I've already gotten rid of this. Whoopsie. I've already gotten rid of all of this in completely by accident in the book I was writing. So let me go find the book. Yeah, not having it. Oh, I know. Code Pill, believe me, I know. What do you think so I'm taking a lot of the ideas from Scrivener, obviously not copyrighted, but or patented or anything. The main advantage of Scrivener is it modularizes everything. Everything becomes just a little piece of something. It's like if you were writing in the physical world, you'd have a big old desktop, just like Lumen did with his Zettelkasten, and he would have all these little slips all over the place, and he would organize, he'd physically move his slips around, and he'd get them to where he wanted and say, okay, this order of slips needs to be a chapter. And he would take those slips and he would flesh it out, and that would become the skeleton for his book. And that's how he got 70 or something books out of that Zettelkasten that he wrote in a very short amount of time. And Scrivener takes that approach. I don't think they were even informed by Zettelkasten, but they arrived at the same idea that so you have all this research and everything. This is a place where you dump all your research, and then you also have your final product over here. And so, but the section is over here. So let's say you want to move that section. You drag the section in the outline down to some other place, and the entire titled section and all of its composite stuff inside of it moves down visibly, and you can see it all. We can do those same things in that idea of modular composition and aggregation. It's like the aggregation of composition. Composition is the parts would all go away if it went away. But aggregation is, hey, let's rearrange these things to how they would go together. And the other thing that's great about aggregation in this way that we're doing it is that aggregation, you can actually have the same section be included in multiple pods or multiple KEGs or different dynamic pods. And let me show you what I mean by that. So in the book that I started to write, I immediately had this problem. I was like, I want to keep everything flat so I can get to the right thing and just see all my stuff and just search from this. I mean, it's so easy to search because I don't have to have any extra technology besides LS, and I can see everything. And then I can go. So one of the ones that's composed of something else, we have the table of contents, which is not a composition. This is not meant to be a composition. That's why it's a bulleted list. But if you have a bulleted list instead of an ordered list, that is, I talked about this yesterday, but if you have a list that is just, it's just a bulleted list pointing to other nodes, okay, then by definition, it also qualifies as a bulleted import list. So this is not strictly specified in KEG, but it is something that makes it really easy. I talked about this last night, where you can just click on the things when it's in a README in a GitHub. But when you want to make it into something bigger, you want to make an aggregate of it, rather than having all of these titles be a thing, you still have one main idea. You have the idea up here, you have the text up here, that's the main idea, and then you see, okay, there's a lot of other ideas here that are composed into this, but we still only have the one title. And these other sections, rather than having be sections, you make them bullet points for the rest of the document, and you can rearrange them by just moving these lines. If I want to put the other one first, I just put it up there. It doesn't matter. I can reorganize them however I want. And if I say, well, this one actually belongs in the other one, I can copy and paste that into the other document. And so we get the aggregation by definition. And so when I go to render this thing, which I've already tested, you can go say, okay, replace this line item with the text, recursively, the decomposition or whatever, the aggregation of all the things down below. And you have, at that point, you have software, because that's what software is. It's a composition of other things. So I am super inclined. In fact, I have just about talked myself into forcing a text node to have one title. Because here's why. If you can force yourself into a single title and a single heading, you will force yourself mentally to distill the idea. This is the advantage of Zettelkasten, but why not build it into KEG? I've just convinced myself that this is going to be necessary. And why? Why? Because if you don't have that, then you have a real tough decision to make. Right? Because now you have a title here. You're like, well, how do I refer to it in the same document? There's no standard for that at all. There's absolutely no standard for that. There isn't. Everything I'm doing here is already standardized and supported in GitHub, Pandoc, and every place else. Because all I'm doing is linking to an actual other thing that the README gets pulled up after that. Have we had stuff? Yeah. So I'm going to do this. And by the way, this forces you to create your slug. It forces you to create your slug. That means if you're going to change the slug, or you're going to change the reference to that thing, you get to do it. You can use any valid characters in the file system. You don't have to be subjected to the different, whims of title to slug conversion algorithms, and you're covered. So I actually just addressed a huge problem, and I didn't even plan on it for doing it that way. And I'm actually going to capture that right now. I won't do that on stream though. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So let's finish this. But thank you for helping me go through that. We don't have that thing on C yet. I made a video about C just now though. So anyway, only we're actually going to change the blocks to be title. Yeah, that's it. And oh boy. This is gonna be a problem actually. No headings other than title. And yeah, and the title other than the title, which is required. Yeah, so that's a big deal, man. I'm really glad I figured that out. This is gonna make people like JGM they're just gonna hate it. They're gonna totally hate it, but I don't care. So, semantics, syntax, verbose. What else do I got to talk about here? ATX style headings only. We don't even need that. There's no such thing because headings are not a thing. Wait. Okay. Hard line breaks, new lines ignored. A new line is ignored, paragraph bulleted, numbered. Only classes for semantic and syntax, single word, no space allowed. Classes are limited to single words, no key value attributes. That's the thing. Only classic for that. For semantics, syntax, blocks, and sem span. Okay, and so then what do we have? No key. Let's see. All right, so what else do we have? Spans are plain docs, bold italic, plain italic, bold, bold italic, strike, math, and sem. Yeah. Well, italic, strike, math, and sem. Sem is for semantic. We should probably change this to be div and this to be span. So that's generic, right? I think we're going to change div to block. I'm just going to change it to block. Blocks are paragraph, bulleted, numbered, figure, title, syntax, verbatim, text, quote, and a block. A block is just, I mean, it's one or more things, right? So that would be compound, right? What would we call that? I guess let's just call it a div. It's not a division, though. It's, what do we want to call that? I think we should call it semantic. We want to call it semantic. I want people to use the semantic division. So like a note is a semantic thing, right? I just don't know about this. I think span should be sem. Yeah, we'll make span. That's a semantic span, and semantic block is fully worded out. Okay. And all spans must be considered semantic. All spans and blocks must be considered semantic. I mean, it's not about the design of it. Support for GitHub tables only. GitHub tables are crazy hard to parse. So I don't know how we're going to provide support for that, but they're very hard to detect too, because you have to actually, look for the data. You have to parse the entire block and then examine the block to see if it's a table. And that is really annoying, but we need to have some support for tables in there. And I'm going to pick one. And GitHub tables is supported by GitHub, and even though it's not as good as Pandoc tables, that's what we're going to support. It's also the fastest to write, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of tables, but occasionally you need one. I mean, Medium completely bans tables. Yeah, I'm really tempted to leave tables out. Let's leave tables out. We're going to leave tables out. You know why? No tables. Better in data nodes instead. And I don't think we should have a table. Because, look, you can include a table. You can say, go click on this and go look at this table, right? And so you can click on a data table. This is beautiful. This is really coming together. It's got to be the caffeine and talking it through. Rather than have a table, you have a data node. And you can include a link to the data node, and then people can actually go read it. Why did Spotify just crash? What the hell just happened? Did somebody hack me? Anyway, table DTD, if you want to get a look at how deep it can get. I'm not doing tables at all. I'm just throwing tables out. We don't need them. All a table is a really crappy version of structured data. You should be consuming that data as structured data. Did you really, Admiral? You should be constructing that data as structured data. And if you want to refer to it at a specific point, and if you want to eventually compose it into something else, then you can pull it in. Chat is now in control. I know, I wonder. Yeah. Oh my God, this is like so awesome. This is going to make short work of this. The parser for this is going to be so crazy fast because it's going to be so simplified. It's so much better. I love it. Okay. So only classes for, let's see, only semantic, syntax, blocks, and sem span support classes. Classes are limited to single words, no key value attributes, no space allowed between initial token and blocks with classes. Spans are, we put this next to, where's the blocks? Plain, italic, bold, fill, italic, strike, math. I'm so tempted to do emphasis here, but HTML5 has decided to make italic a semantic thing. And because of novelization and stuff, I'm going to leave that in there. All spans and blocks must be semantic, like HTML5. It's not, most of the time it'll be italic, but it doesn't necessarily have to be italic, right? So, I mean, I would rather have something else there, you know. I mean, we could do it. These actually translate to emphasis. There's emphasis, strong, and strong emphasis. Should we do that? Strong emphasis. I don't understand what strong is. Somebody really tried hard to come up with another word for bold. So what's the difference between emphasis and strong? I've never known this. I'm just going to keep the HTML5 specification. It's just so much easier. It's just easier. I want to know. It's kind of a, yeah, a strike through. A strike through should actually be delete, you know, or replace or something like that. We're calling that, we'll just call that strike though. The problem with these is that they are, the names are visual, I mean, you know, stylistic, and they're not semantic, and that drives me crazy. I mean, it's driven people on the HTML specification team crazy for decades. And that's the whole thing between I and B and all that. So, bold, italic, strike, math. I mean, emphasis, strong. I don't know. I don't know what to do here. Plain. It would be like normal. Spans would be like default. We have the default span, whatever that is. Actually, no, let's call it base. You have the base. Both the EM and strong would be needed. I don't know either, except for that's what's covered. So you're going to have italics. You're going to have italics with bold, and then you're going to have bolded italic. You have italics. You're going to have bold, and you're going to have bold italic. So, well, first of all, we can't nest them, and that's what's going on here, right? And strong is supposed to be strong emphasis. I mean, you're supposed to mix those two together when you want the two, but you can't. We can't. There's no nesting, so we have to have strong emphasis. Okay. M strong. Sim. Should we have STM? Strem. Strong emph. Semph. No nested lists. Hell no. Because it's really bad. You don't want it. Nested lists are really, really bad. They're really hard to digest and parse, and Medium bans them for that reason. And people get crazy. They'll end up doing a full YAML outline, and they should just put it in a data document. People are going to yell, but I don't care. People love Medium, and Medium has all those constraints on purpose, so we're just duplicating that. Paste the WinZip into C folder. I don't know what that is about, but strong. Strong emph. How about that? A strong emph. Strength. What? Outlines? No, they're easy. You can do outline in YAML easy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can do outlines, but usually when you want that, you don't. Yeah. The tough part's going to be things like table of contents and stuff like that. But anyway, we'll try this. If somebody yells, then we'll add it. But I want to keep stuff restricted at first. Base EM, strong M, strike, math, somewhere. Spans composed of fields of printable Unicode code points. Words composed of Unicode. Visibles. Letters. A field and a word. Fields composed of words. Fields composed of words and punctuation. Words composed of Unicode letters only. Hyphenated terms, etc. Words composed of Unicode letters, punctuation separated from words, in resulting AST. Yeah. So this is super important. Is the AST is going to be down to probably. I mean, if you look at the Pandoc AST, let me show you. So this document I'm writing right now, right? If I do Pandoc, and I do to AST, what is it? JSON. So this is the AST. And just to read it, let's run it through JQ. And so this is the AST that comes out of Pandoc when it breaks down a document. So it breaks it into blocks, and you have, header and stuff, and it has its own opinions about everything. But as you can see, it calls it a string, and then it has a space, and then it has another string, and KEGML is another string. So it calls it string, it calls it words. We should probably maybe use string instead of word, but a word, because a word could be a field. But see, you have markdown space for knowledge. Now, but here's the crazy thing. Watch what happens when you start to get into parameterize stuff like this. So this is one of the biggest failures of Pandoc, in my opinion. Pandoc makes no distinction between a Unicode letter and a Unicode punctuation. And I feel like that was a major fail in the possibilities of being able to capture what is possible. And Pandoc was made several years before I think Unicode really took flight. But the entire Unicode scope is so valuable, and so to throw it away is very, very sad. Because I mean, if you're going to count words, this string here would count as a word, right? I do think it's fair to say that. So, like, say for example, the word don't. Don't is a contraction of two words. But when you're parsing that thing, that's going to become two strings and a punctuation symbol in between. So you're going to get a string, a punct, and then a string, right? But all of it combined together, separated by white space, is considered a field. So let's say you have one that has a quote on the end, like this parenthesis, right? So the unfortunately the converters that go through these things have no way to do smart quotes, because they have to examine the AST that comes out of this, and they have to look at the strings and infer a whole bunch of extra stuff that they would not have had to do if the AST had been smart enough to distinguish punctuation from word spans or string spans. because and that's all available in the code point specification to do. So it's really too bad that they didn't do that. And I mean, even if the code that I write for this isn't used for anything but what I'm doing, so be it, right? But the advantage of that, I mean, there's several disadvantages. We're probably going to have to count fields in terms of words, right? Because, you know, a word that's got a quote on it or a semicolon, that you know, if you're going to do a word count on that, you should do that. But strictly speaking, we should probably have the term fields, because fields are separated by white space. And that's the accurate. People use words for that all the time. Like if you do a WC on something, it's going to use white space to delimit everything. And that it just very simplistically calls those words when you do WC for word count. And yeah, this is like really, really zoomed in. This is JSON. Yeah, this is the JSON AST that's managed internally. And it's also completely horrible in terms of parsing. It is JSON, but it's really, really horrible because there's a lot of other ways to do this. And in my PEGN syntax, I've got a much better way of doing this that uses, you know, constants to identify each one. And so the AST, the model of the AST, the rendition of the AST is also a problem, right? Because, but if we tokenize or lex all this stuff properly, we don't have to add attributes to our different things. And we're going to be writing that in PEGN here pretty soon, but we won't have to add attributes because the attribute will be in the name. So if we get the AST, if we get this done right, we don't have to have extra things in here. We can just tokenize the entire thing and then apply the semantics to it. Now, in the parser that I'm making, it will actually do syntax checking after it does the parsing. It'll apply syntax rules and say, nope, sorry, can't do that. But the really cool thing about that is once we get this done, we can do all the tokenizing, and we're about to do that today. And then we can come back and we can say, okay, now I want to apply JSON schema, which I used to be kind of against, but these days I'm kind of like, no, JSON schema is not too bad. So I can actually take an entire document, write a JSON schema definition for the exact syntax, and submit that to stored schemas, and now provide universal support for language servers that parse JSON that matches that AST syntax. So, and then of course that can all be built into a language server and all that. But if you want the validation of a document becomes, you know, output its AST in JSON and then run that JSON against a schema validation to see if it matches. And if it does, it's fine. You know, if it's not, go look at the exact line number that thing happened on, right? Or that parsing or that semantic line happened on. Now, one of the problems with this, of course, is you know, to identify the location in the file. But so, all right. So I'm about done. I'm going to go back to coding here, but I'm about all summaried out here of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. And this isn't really a question. I'm going to make this video here is going to be one in a series of. I'll probably make a Go programming thing. I don't know which one to do. Maybe I should just do like a KEG series. It's just about all the stuff I'm doing with KEG. I'll probably do that. Put that in my playlist. So, because I think some people have been wanting to kind of keep track of that. So we'll do that. Anyway, so let's get rid of that. What are we doing here? We're looking through the control characters. And I think we're reading the documentation here. And I think we almost made it to the end. Classes are limited. Single node space is allowed. All spans of blocks must be semantic. Spans composed of fields are printable. Unicode characters. Fields composed of words and punc. Words composed of Unicode letters. No. We're going to say printable code points. Fields composed of strings and punc. I guess we're going to say letters. That's what they're called in Unicode. Fields composed of letters and punctuation. Letters, punctuation, and we should probably have emoji. I don't know if it's punctuation. We should probably have a different type here, and printable. Letters, punctuation, and printable. So printables include emotes and all that stuff. I did a whole video on no boost today. It's in the VOD. You can go look at that. Yeah, do the video. Let me show you. If you go back to my videos, you can go see that one. We're gonna do. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm talking. Go watch the other video. If you go back, there's a VOD. Actually, if you go back earlier in the VOD, you can see it for today. It's gonna get posted tomorrow. Full Unicode. We're doing some Go coding though, so full Unicode class support and tables. Full Unicode class support. Yeah, no tables better than data. Okay, so that's it. That's it for the where I'm at today on the Pomo thing. Go ahead and stop recording now.